First of all, I always thought that breast cancer was a white woman's disease. I didn't know that black women got breast cancer, and that was mainly because all the promotions featured white women. So I just thought, oh, black women don't get this. And then, lo and behold, I was diagnosed with stage 3 advanced breast cancer. I thought after that I finished with the IV and the chemo that I was going to go home. I didn't know I had to take additional not over-the-counter, but prescription drugs. And I went, and it was quite expensive. And I thought to myself, okay, what do poor people do? How do women that look like me, that is less fortunate than I am, how do they make it? How do they find the money to pay for this prescription, take care of their families, cover all their finances? That must be so difficult for them. And then I was at home one morning feeling, terrible after chemotherapy treatment. Couldn't get off the bed. It was terrible. And I thought to myself, okay, I don't want any other woman that looks like me to have to go through this alone. So when I get better, I'm going to do something about this. That started the journey of me and the Olive Branch of Hope.
The Olive Branch of Hope's office is situated on Indigenous land. This is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. The Olive Branch of Hope gratefully acknowledges these Indigenous nations for their guardianship of this land. The Olive Branch of Hope also recognizes stolen people from across the world who have inhabited this land by force. Slavery prior to and including the transatlantic slave trade continuing through modern day human trafficking have brought Indigenous people from across the globe to care for this land. We acknowledge the truth of our Canadian history and commit ourselves to reconciliation, knowledge, and careful intention. I invite you to take a moment of silence. Feel free to use this moment for prayer, memory of a loved one, or to set an intention for your engagement in this space. Thank you for holding this moment of silence with me.
Well, good evening. Thank you. Hey, sister, thank you for joining us in our conversation today as we continue our 30 Days of HERstory campaign in support of the Olive Branch of Hope. Before we jump in, I just want to share with you that we're here to let you and everyone know about the amazing work done by this organization. TOBOH, affectionately noted, TOBOH, was started over 20 years ago and has been holding a sacred space for women of African ancestry as they journey through cancer treatment and thrive through life afterwards. Our founder, the visionary and stalwart leader, Ms. Lily Springer, is joined by her board and volunteers in saying, thank you. Thank you for joining us and for watching. And we would really appreciate you sharing out this link with everyone that you know so that they can jump right into this conversation. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome to the stage our beautiful guest for this afternoon. Her name is Debra Williams, and she is going to join us. Hey, Debra.
Hey.
Debra is an author and experience coach, and I am so thrilled to know that, guess what? She is in the GTA. She is right here in Canada. And so, Debra, we are so excited to have you on the show. I'm looking forward to our conversation. I'm so thankful that you have you've made space and time in your calendar to join us. And not only Canadians, but the world needs to know who Debra Williams is. So I would just like to ask you right off the bat, who is Deborah? What should we know about? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's my pleasure to join you, and I really appreciate your time and the time of everyone. We all have very busy lives, and to ask you to have one more, session online is a lot. So we're going to make it fun and entertaining and informative. And um,
Absolutely.
thank you. I'm Deborah Williams, and who am I? I'm someone who's a daughter and a sister and a friend and a confidant and a professional and an author and all those things wrapped into one, and a simple person who just really loves life and enjoys living in the GTA. And I feel very blessed and fortunate to be able to live my life the way I want to live it, with my voice, and to be able to pursue the professional and personal things that I want to do within measure. As you said, I'm an experienced coach, and where that comes from is, for years I was doing a lot of things in professional practices. I had some very austere a professional practice designation. I'm an auditor and a fraud examiner, for example, and that
Mhm.
sounds very serious. But even as I grew through my managerial skills and my progressively increasing roles of responsibility, what I realized about interacting with people is that what you're doing is, whether it's transformation or everyday incremental work that people are doing, you're navigating an experience through something. And
Mm.
so, the word, life coach was a very popular thing to say at one point, but I'm not really sure what that means. But when it comes to being an experienced coach, when I'm dealing with people at work, or I'm talking with my friends or with my family, I'm very conscious, especially after COVID, about how we are experiencing things. If COVID did anything, it was make us sit with our thoughts,
Yes.
and sit with our thoughts for a whole lot longer than we've ever sat with our thoughts, unintentionally or otherwise. And I think people emerge from that in a very different mindset about how to see themselves in the world. We have a lot of mental health issues that have come from COVID. Maybe people need to do a bit more journaling. They need to reach out more to people for help. But when I'm talking with people, I always think about what they're experiencing in the moment, and how to coach someone through that experience if they're having a hard time, and use both my life experience to do it, and sometimes my professional practice to go to an agile training or some other sort of change management training if it needs to be more structured. But I call it experience coaching because I really want someone to have a good experience with me and be better after they're with me. So that's my take on being an experience coach. With respect to being an author, that was as a result of coming through the pandemic and really missing my mom quite a bit. She died in 2019, right
Mm.
before this world shut down. And I was actually going through a lot of photographs because we didn't really know. In retrospect, we had a lot more time than we ever thought we needed to do this. But I felt a sense of urgency to say, well, if and I say safe at home, not stuck at home, because if you have the privilege to be able to be at home and be able to order food in, and could manage, a roomy space where you were able to manage your time, you were safe at home. So
Yeah.
that's the way I wanted to experience that. I got out some photographs, and I looked at all these great black and white photographs of my mom and my grandmother in their majestic hats, these amazing hats that they used to wear. And I'm going a little bit more into our conversation than you want to
No,
be.
that's fine.
Who I am right now is someone that's looking at my past, and manifesting what I need to do in my present to be able to vision my future the way I want it to go, in a very intentional way. But I'm someone that, am formally educated. I have a master's degree. I travel a lot. I've been all over the world, and I'm very thoughtful in the moment about journaling and really writing down my thoughts and being intentional about the way I experience my life and the way I talk with people, so that things are better every day.
I love that. I'm going to pick at some of the things you shared because I think I can relate to a lot of what you're talking about. I really liked when you said that you were safe at home and not stuck at home. I felt very much the same way. I didn't feel stuck. I'm a mixed bag. I don't know about you. I like being home. I like being out with people.
Mm,
But when you're home and when you can sit quiet, which is something that, as I was, as walking and I was thinking today, I've said it many times that people don't stop long
mhm,
enough to sit, to be still,
Mhm.
to even hear their own thoughts and process their thoughts. And you're right. The pandemic did that for a lot of us. Some people were, I think a lot of us got afraid to be still and to hear our own thoughts. And so, it was not, I believe it was not all negative, and I'm not minimalizing uh,
Mhm.
what happened, but I think it was a wake up call for all of us to feel what it is, to just stop. And I love the fact that people get an experience working with you. And you're right, a life coach. No disrespect to anybody that uses the term life coach. Sometimes I've had to use it myself because people wonder, well, what is a resilient coach? But you're
Yeah.
working with people so that they can become more resilient. And your life story and your life history will impact how people experience you. So that is just fantastic. I am curious as to know what your take on vision, how the term vision impacted you in impacts you in being a coach, but
Mhm.
also as an author, because you have published an amazing book, which we're going to talk about shortly. But how has vision impacted your life? Even how the pandemic has impacted vision for your life, as you were talking about, pulling out old pictures, which I love to do. Just touching and feeling those pictures is beautiful.
Well, I'll use the word vision to explain how I grew up a little bit in context. I grew up in my parents' variety store unpacking the comics when I was a child. And so I used to read the futuristic comics, the Marvel comics, the DC comics, anything that was set in the future. And you saw a lot of diverse characters in comics that you didn't see in other literature. And my favorite character is, of course, Lieutenant Uhura with the Star Trek series, because she was the communications officer out in the middle of the galaxy, interpreting for the betterment of all humanity and all the aliens that were met out in the middle of nowhere. And she was such an important part of the officer class
Yes.
in this universe that was back in the 60s.
Yes.
And so I just really enjoyed going through life thinking about seeing myself in the future, right? And
Mm.
so a mission statement or a strategy is something that's very pedagogical. It's something that's very action oriented. It's something that you have to do transactionally. But when you have a vision of where you're going to be in the future, I think it's very exciting because it means you make it. We make it to the future, right? It means that we can see ourselves thriving. We can see ourselves making innovative changes. We can see ourselves being a part of the solution. You know, we can see ourselves overcoming what needs to be done to be able to get better and not doing it alone. Nobody has a vision of being alone. And so being visionary means, going far together. An African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go
Yes.
far, go together.
Yeah.
So we all want to go together. And so if you have a vision of the future, you have to look to your left and right and say, how do we lift as we climb? And how do we
Mhm.
go together? And just to go back a bit, I work in equity, diversity, and inclusion, and that's a really great place for me because it takes into account all the values that come with listening to people from other cultures and who are multicultural and intersectional, and not see someone as a monolith. On all the different intersections that help you to understand what someone else is going through, so that you can be inclusive and think
Mhm.
beyond yourself and your needs. Think that maybe the good of the many outweighs the good of the few or the one, right? That's straight from
Yeah.
Star Trek. So
Yeah.
when it comes to vision, if and we're just coming out of well, we're technically just coming out of a pandemic where we have to be safe inside, but I think people emerge from that very differently. If they were paying attention, they emerge very differently. And you're seeing some interesting patterns in the world. Like I'm very into African art, and there was a very prolific, trade of stolen artwork. And what people are finding is that, all the Benin bronzes that used to be traded in the underground world of art theft and trading art for value that was never realized by their home country. They're having a hard time selling those because there's such an awareness now about that these stolen art, and it needs to be returned to its place of origin. And
Mm.
there's a whole ethics around it now because of the work that was done by people to say, you shouldn't be enjoying this artwork in the Tate Museum. You should have to go where it was done to be enriched in the environment where it was created. So there's encouraging things out there that are happening where people are seeing a vision for the future, where people have agency and ownership,
Yeah.
and a lot of that is reflected in my book.
Powerful. I like what you said, and I do agree. Ascribing the ownership back to where it came from. There's a lot of good things that are coming out of this pandemic, and there's a lot of hard work being done. The concept of lifting as we climb. I never knew that phrase until a few years ago,
Mm,
but somehow my parents, especially my mother,
mhm,
taught us the importance of bringing people with us.
mhm,
I owe a lot and attribute a lot to my mom teaching us about sharing. And our home was always open. It didn't matter who you were. It didn't matter what you look like. So I constantly remind her, I appreciate that about her. Being from Jamaican descent,
mhm.
she didn't teach us to stick to one type of food, but she introduced us to international cultures
Mhm.
because she didn't know who we were going to interact with, but she wanted us to be able to be open to receive from them. So I think that that is so powerful, very, very, very powerful. I don't know, are you an only sibling? Are
No, I have an older sister and a younger brother.
so you're right smack in the middle.
Well, funny story. My mother was never supposed to have children, and my sister was a bit of a miracle. She had her at the ghastly late stage of 28, back then when women were supposed to have been done with their children. And then she had me 4 years later, and it was kind of like, well, that's it, there's just two. And then she had my brother 16 years later. So I'm in the middle, but I'm not exactly smack in the middle.
Yeah.
He was a wonderful surprise.
Yep, I can relate. From the numbers wise, I totally get it. I have a brother under me too. Same, very similar story. I can
Yep.
relate to that. So you being the second born, did you ever feel like you had to fight for your voice? Was there ever, even amongst your siblings or growing up, has there ever been a time where you felt as though your voice was
Mhm.
diminished or silenced?
Not in the familial context at all. My sister, I always thought my sister, well, and she still is the pretty one. She's the one that just was tall and she's a beautiful shape and she had a beautiful smile and the guys just went for her and I just
Oh,
thought
you're
she's the
beautiful.
pretty one. I was the bookworm. I was the one that literally sat in a corner with a stack of books all summer and just read. And I've been journaling ever since I could write, and I always found solace in reading and writing. I would escape, and so this was why my job in my parents' variety store was out packing up the books and the comics because I could spend hours doing that and sort of very very kind of particular about making sure they were aligned up in alphabetical and so they could leave that to me. When if it got messy, I'd run over there and I'd fix the whole bookshelf again. And I love books. I love reading. I love reading materials. And so now I've graduated to writing. But when it comes to my brother, he's like a very wonderful mix of the both of us.
Right.
It's really wonderful to see him flourish as somebody that is just a great father and a great husband and a brother and a son and a great partner to his wife. And
So
he's just really wonderful. But there was never any sort of like rivalry like that because we always had a voice in our home. Our parents were Caribbean, very, very Caribbean, but weird in the fact that there wasn't this children's place where you don't say anything at the dinner table. There's a tendency where
yes. Yeah.
if we want your opinion, we'll give it to you.
Yes.
In the
Yeah.
Caribbean household, our
Yeah.
parents weren't like that, and
Yeah.
so there wasn't really that much competition.
Beautiful.
Um, Not in that way at all. If there was ever any silencing, it was always in a professional context
Yeah.
where maybe I was a little bit more intelligent than the people around me would have liked for me to be in a mostly white work setting, or somebody really wasn't ready for the ideas that I had, and so they were afraid of change and transformation, and they would try to subvert and silence that. But I was always
Mhm.
the kind of person not to stay very long in a place where I wasn't heard. I was, yeah. I was never loyal to something or somewhere or someone who wasn't listening. And so the minute I felt othered, or as if my value was supposed to be just blind loyalty and that I wasn't a part of my own agency, I had a tendency to leave. So,
You know, I envy that aspect about you because I wish I had been that person. I think I tolerated and put up with a lot of nonsense.
mm,
What do you say to not even the younger me, but what do you say to the person or the woman that feels like she is working in an environment where she is silenced?
mm,
I mean, when our voices are rising a lot now. But what would you say to encourage or to challenge that young woman that feels as though her opinions, her suggestions, her recommendation, her voice, and not only her verbal voice, but her contributions are being silenced?
Oh, I would say there's never a better time to be a woman who has options to be able to move to a place where you feel valued. And I think where it comes from is not only being a child in a household that valued our voices, but I traveled a lot early and throughout my life, and put myself in situations that were foreign to me. Going to Dubai, going to Turkey, going to Mexico, going to places where I stood out, going to places where I blended in, and you understand that the North American situation that you're in, or even the town you're in, or even the neighborhood you're in, isn't the only place to be, and it's not the only place that defines your value. And so I think if you, especially if someone goes right from high school to university to a job in the same environment, they may not have a perspective about where they belong. They may think this is it, and I just need to try harder. That kind of lean in idea that you just need to put your hand up higher and you just need to work longer hours. And there's no need to do that. It may be that you just need to be someplace else. And
Right.
so volunteering does that. Volunteering outside of your comfort zone, volunteering in a situation where it puts you in a room with totally different people, so that you can see the needs of others and you can be around other like-minded people who share your values, your social values, your socio-demographic values, and being able to have conversations outside of that silo of having your friends as your work mates as your friends. I
Right.
was never one to make the people I work with my only friend base, because then you don't have a perspective of who you are outside of your job. And again, I am a real big advocate for traveling and reading. It's
Yes.
I grew up reading biographies, and that's like taking a trip around the world when you read about someone else's life, especially someone you think you know, right? So you pick up a book about someone you like, or like, oh, I want to know more about them, and you find out something horrible, or you find out that you put them on a pedestal that they don't deserve, or you find out that it's about the persistence, that this person looks as if it just came to them
Yeah.
like nobody's business, but really they tried really hard for a long time, and so they look like an overnight success, but this was a lot of work. And so that perspective of reading, traveling, and being outside of your comfort zone, even if it's just an hour, with your church if you belong to one, with some professional practice society if you belong to it, being a speaker. And one of the things I started doing a couple of years ago is I'm a member of the Association of Fraud Examiners, and they've reached out to me and said, we'd like to invite you to be a speaker. I'd never done it before. I was like, well, they're inviting me, so I'm going to do it. I came up with something to say, and the next thing you know, I was the lecturer. And then I started mentoring. And so I'm mentoring mostly young people who want to become certified fraud examiners on the African continent, hearing what, what they're going through, how they have to go to some cafe in the middle of the night just to talk with me for internet, and how they want to deal with corruption in their country, and their determination to be a difference, make a difference in their community. It's so inspiring, right? So my value is more than just I have this degree, I go to work for this much time, and I get this much money.
Deborah, I feel like you're the sister that I didn't meet. You were hanging around my neighborhood somewhere, but maybe I didn't just walk far enough to meet you.
Maybe.
Because there's a lot of commonality. The books, my brothers left me home, so I love to read. The journaling, it was the pen and paper where you just download your thoughts, um, and I know I'm going back a little bit, but I had to, I just had to laugh when you said that you had the task of unpacking comic books, because I live in a house. I feel like I live in a comic book sometimes. No, they're all comic book lovers, and I'm not sure if my daughter is listening now, but I'm sure she would want to ask you, Deborah, did you keep any of those comics? Because my grandmother threw a lot of them out. Did you?
No, unfortunately not. Did any of them just go to Comic-Con?
She went a couple of years ago. She's wanting to go to, what's the next one in San Diego, or the one that here?
It's just Comic-Con here.
Comic-Con was last week, but there's another one that comes, and
Having a blank.
Yes, it beats me, but the other one, yes. So she's into all of that. She's into all of
And
that.
no, I did not keep them. I had some good ones, but moving from Jamaica and then moving to Canada, and then going to school, university in the States,
That was cool.
I have the whole Black Panther series. That's all I have.
Okay. I'm not sure if she's watching, but she just might back channel or hit you up because, it's very much Marvel DC. But I digress.
No problem. Oh, I turn her on to Black Sun Comics as well. That's an Afrofuturism series. That's done by someone local, and I think she'll really like that.
She'll probably tell me she knows about it.
I hope so.
I'll mention it to
wonderful.
her. I find it, I agree with you. I love what you said about the traveling, and I hope that anybody listening here is challenged. If you haven't stepped out of your comfort zone, I totally agree with you. When I started traveling when I was younger, and first of all, when I went to another part of our country, where children had never seen a Black person before, and I won't mention the province, so I don't out them, but the little boy walked up to me and he touched my hands because he squeezed my hand to see if it came off. And I said, "No, baby, it doesn't come off. This is me, all through and through."
And that's just curiosity.
And that was just curiosity. Yeah. And I wasn't angry. I wasn't angry at all because I've had to deal with that throughout growing up. But it was astonishing to me. This child had never seen anybody that looked like me before. And I guess he wasn't told that we're here and we've been here for a long time.
Yep. Those experiences are really precious because, you open up a dialogue with someone of another culture, and then they tell you something you didn't know.
Exactly.
So,
and then you realize that the world that you think you knew is huge. And it's a very big world. I just random thought just came back to me when Harriet Tubman ran away and started running, and she was exposed to the sights and sounds outside of the the plantation. One of the things she probably was trying to fuel into people was that there is a big world side here and you can experience it. So how does the idea of writing your own version of your own story and taking control of the narrative make you feel? You're a leader. I find it very hard to believe that you had never spoken before because, girl, you got it. But it is what it is. But, how does the idea of writing your own version of your own story, taking control of the narrative, make you feel?
So it's very empowering. It's also very enlightening because, you start to write and then you realize that you have a lot to say and that you do a lot of self-discovery. And then you realize that other people could benefit from it as well. Every time I read a story, and I love biographies because of this, and someone reveals something that other people don't know, a hardship or something they did or something that happened to them, it adds such context to, this tapestry that is life and how you need to be able to navigate through it. and
Yes.
continue to have a vision of yourself. And a
Yes.
lot of the people that are, you know, famous or infamous or have done great things, it wasn't really that they had a much better idea or were that much smarter. It's that they they went ahead with that vision. They made a decision that what they saw for themselves was true and
Yeah.
that no one was going to get in their way.
Yeah.
Some people do have greatness thrust upon them and they have to find a vision somewhere because they didn't know they're going to be in that situation. Those people are truly remarkable. But you know, when I wrote the book Church Hat and I've given it to people, they've said, you know, this is such an interesting story because, you know, this happened to me, or this is something that I can relate to. I have a family member and I wish they had this book when they were growing up.
Yeah. 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 No, that's awesome. So tell us about Church Hat. This is a book that uh, Debra just wrote. She just released. Give us a snippet. See that beautiful picture, that beautiful book. Look at the beautiful colors. Can you give us a 15-second rundown on just what would we just give us a synopsis on Church Hat?
Sure. So, I'm mid, you know, early pandemic, and I find this beautiful set of photographs. I think my mom and my grandmother were at a formal function, and they just had these church hats on, and I decided that I wanted to write a tribute to them. I decided I
Mm,
really miss my mom a lot, and I miss my grandmother as well. And I thought that the unifying theme of the church hat was a as a nod to our culture back in the Caribbean, where you know hats were an indication about how formal it was. And you know, there's three sizes to hats. There's big, bigger, and why'd you have to sit in front of me? And these hats were the why'd you have to sit in front of me hats. And I thought, you know, growing up, my there was people in the LGBTQ to us orientation in our family, but they were never silenced. And I didn't know how odd that was until I was around other families where you couldn't talk about being anything other than it was very binary. There were boys and girls, and they were straight, and that was it. And you know, you talk about your home being one where the door was open to everyone, and that's the way my grandmother was. And so this was a tribute to her and my mother who took on those traits where there was
mm,
always room at the table for someone, and we would find people who would come to our house because it wasn't really great at their house. And
mm.
so the book is about a little boy who gets caught. He's 6, you know, and he gets caught trying on his mother's hat after church, and he thinks he's in trouble because all the signals in the world are that you are everybody's supposed to, boys like girls and girls like boys, and this is
Mhm.
the way men dress and this is the way women dress. And the point of the book is that he finds safety and comfort, love and understanding
Mhm.
when his mother finds him, you know, posing with her hat on. And she talks to him about it. She says, let's, you know, what is this? You know, you're wearing my hats. You know, first of all, she's like, take my hat off. But second
Because
of
they
all, she's
are
like,
sensitive.
she's like, why do you want to do this? And he just explains, you know, I want to wear hats and dress up to look like you.
Mhm.
And so her answer is, let's keep talking about this. She stays in a mother's place of advice and love. She allows him to be in a child's place, which is curious and
Right.
safe. But
Mhm.
she also says, how about you put my hat back in that box and we'll go and get you your own hat? You know, while we continue to talk about what you're going through. And
Right.
I just wanted this book to be one that is not an agenda. I'm not trying to tell people how to raise their kids. I'm just saying that um, well, I'll give you an example. I was on holiday not too long ago, and I brought this to a friend of mine who we visited just one day, hadn't seen in a while, and he's gay, and gave him this book, and he burst into tears. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he was like, "When I was 4, my little sister was born, and I put my little sister in a pram, because we call them
Yes,
prams in
yes.
Jamaica as well, and
Yep.
he put on his mother's heels and dressed himself up like his mother and went walking with his sister
Yes.
to be like, I'm the mommy now, and went
Yeah.
walking with his sister. And the answer was that he got the beating of his life,
Right.
you know. And I said, this is why people aren't talking about this, because it usually when if you're in a household that isn't going to allow you to
Mhm.
talk about your authentic self, the answer is suppression, and
Right.
sometimes very violent suppression. And he said,
Yeah.
yeah, he looked at me and he said, how comes I didn't write this book? And I said, because it's traumatic. And I said, my grandmother and my mother decided that the generational trauma ended with them.
Yeah.
And that's what I observed. And that's what I'm trying to convey is generational trauma can end with you. Very simple
Mm.
story, about,
Mhm.
him just, describing her hats, and then she finds him posing, you know.
Mhm.
She comes in one day and she finds him posing, and
Mhm.
then it's just their discussion and the fact that they go back to dinner and they go out and get a hat the next day, and the end of the story is we're continuing to talk about what I'm going through.
And
Conversation, safety.
conversation and a safe place
Mhm.
is important.
Yeah.
I remember when, I remember trying on my mom's hats. And those hats
That one time that you
and
got away with
those hats were
it?
expensive, girl, and her shoes.
Yeah.
And I remember, when I was going through cancer and I came in with the wig, and
Mm.
my kids, the wigs are not 5 cents, the wigs are not 5 cents, your shoes are not 5 cents, and the two of them dressing up and playing the fool. But it turned into free comedy for me because children are curious. And one
Yeah.
of the things that we lose as adults sometimes is that curiosity,
Mhm.
which we should, if you hang around kids long enough, you will engage and enjoy that curiosity. And I think that's open. I have loved our conversation, and I cannot believe, I don't know where the time has gone because we have just been talking nonstop. But I want to ask you one final question. When you think of the imagery, when you think of the word, if I say the word to you, victory, in
Mhm.
your mind, what comes to your mind when you hear victory? We've talked about vision. We've
Mhm.
talked about using your voice. When you hear the word victory, what comes to your mind?
I really think it's living your authentic life on your terms.
Mm,
Living your authentic life on your terms, and not letting social media make you aspire for something that you really don't want, but you think you need to keep up with someone else in order to be seen. Really understanding who your friends are, being there for your friends and family, being happy with your own company. The
that part.
ability, yeah, victory is knowing that you're leaving this world the way you want your legacy to speak for you, with your acts and your deeds and who you were, and it doesn't have to be fancy.
I love that.
Can I
I
tell
don't.
you where to find my book? Can I say it's on
Yes.
Amazon?
Oh no, I was going to go there. Go ahead. Tell us where we can connect with you. Tell us where the people can find your book. Go right ahead.
My website is mybestlifebooks.com, and so is my Instagram, and the book is available on Amazon. Just go into, but put in church hat children's book and it'll come up.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Deborah, thank you so very much.
That felt like 5 minutes.
Didn't it feel like it? I
It
mean,
did.
that's when you know you're with good company. That's when you know you're with good company. I want to thank you so very much for taking the time to be with us. I want to thank you for reading all of those books, and for now, we can call you an author because you've done it. And I know it wasn't easy. I've done it a couple of times, and I know it's taken time. And so I appreciate you, and I appreciate that. And I look forward to connecting with you
I
down
certainly do.
the road. We appreciate you so much. So we're so grateful that Deborah Williams has been with us. You heard her, www.mybestlifebooks. You can grab a hold of her book, Church Hats. And I want to extend an invitation to all of our listeners. If you're watching us live, or if you're going to watching the replay, please visit www.HeySisterHerstory. You see it listed there, .ca. That's HEY, Sister, Her Story, .ca, to purchase any of the co-branded items that you see, because Her Story is giving extra from these products to the Olive Branch of Hope. Feel free to donate instead on the website as well if you choose. All funds raised are dedicated to purchasing specialized medical devices for Black women living with lymphedema after breast cancer treatment. So we're so excited about what's happening. We want to thank you again, Deborah, for being with us. The show continues. We are rolling this right out to the end of the month. So you'll catch tomorrow another airing of Her Story interview. But Debra, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you. And we just want to encourage you to continue to be the best experienced coach and author that you are already. Appreciate
Thank you so
you.
much.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
First of all, I always thought that breast cancer was a white woman's disease. I didn't know that Black women got breast cancer, and that was mainly because all the promotions featured white women. So I just thought, oh, Black women don't get this. And then, lo and behold, I was diagnosed with stage 3 advanced breast cancer. I thought after that, I finished with the IV and the chemo, that I was going to go home. I didn't know I had to take additional over-the-counter, not over-the-counter, but prescription drugs. And I went, and it was quite expensive. And I thought to myself, okay, what do poor people do? How do women that look like me, that is less fortunate than I am, how do they make it? How do they find the money to pay for this prescription, take care of their families, cover all their finances? That must be so difficult for them. And then I was at home one morning feeling, terrible after chemotherapy treatment. Couldn't get off the bed. It was terrible. And I thought to myself, okay, I don't want any other woman that looks like me to have to go through this alone. So when I get better, I'm going to do something about this. That started the journey of me and the Olive Branch of Hope.